So you just sold a rental property and now you're racing the clock, because if you don't reinvest the proceeds fast enough, the IRS is going to be waiting at the finish line with a bill. But here's something most investors don't know. You can actually buy first and sell later and still defer your taxes. It's called a reverse 1031 exchange, and while it's not as well known as the standard version, it can be a great tool when used correctly. In this video, we're going to break down what a reverse 1031 exchange is and how it differs from a regular 1031, the steps, timeline, and IRS rules you need to follow, and finally, the biggest drawbacks and why this strategy isn't for everyone. All right, first up, what is a reverse 1031 exchange? In a traditional 1031, you sell your property, identify potential properties within 45 days, and then close on the new property within 180 days to defer the taxes on the sale of your property that you sold. Simple enough. But what happens when you find the perfect replacement property before you've sold your current one? Maybe your current property isn't listed yet, or maybe it's under contract but the buyer's dragging their feet, or maybe you're just worried about not finding a property in time for a regular 1031. That's where the reverse 1031 comes in. It allows you to acquire the new property first and then sell the old one afterward while still deferring your taxes. Now let's talk mechanics. When you do a reverse 1031, you don't just go out and buy the new property directly. The IRS doesn't allow that if you want to preserve your tax benefit. Instead, you work with a qualified intermediary, or QI, just like with a normal 1031. But the QI doesn't just handle paperwork in a reverse 1031. They actually take title to the new property through what's called an exchange accommodation title holder, or EAT. Think of the EAT as a company that temporarily owns the new property on your behalf. You're still the one making decisions, arranging financing, and managing the deal. But for IRS purposes, the EAT is holding the property until your original one is sold. And once that EAT takes title, your countdown begins. You have 45 days to formally identify the property you intend to sell. Then you have 180 days total from the day the new property was acquired to close the sale on your old property. Let's walk through a quick example. Let's say you find a fourplex you want to buy in Austin. It fits your goals perfectly and the numbers work, but your current rental in Denver hasn't sold yet. You structure a reverse 1031. The EAT takes title to the Austin fourplex while you work to sell your Denver property. On day 45, you identify that Denver rental as the property you're selling. You now have 135 more days to close the deal in Denver. If you do, you've successfully deferred your capital gains tax, just like a standard 1031. Now let's talk about the drawbacks, because while reverse 1031s are flexible, they're not simple nor inexpensive. Drawback number one is you need a lot of upfront capital. This is the biggest hurdle. In a traditional 1031, you use the sale proceeds from your old property to buy the new one. But in a reverse 1031, the sale hasn't happened yet. You need the cash or financing lined up to buy the new property before you've sold the old one. Depending on the property, we're talking hundreds of thousands, even millions in potential bridge loans, hard money, or your own cash tied up in the deal. In addition, you may need to get a loan in the name of the EAT instead of yourself or your LLC, which can make it harder to find financing for this, which is one of the reasons why you would want to have your ducks in a row before attempting this. Drawback number two is that reverse 1031s are expensive. A standard 1031 might cost you around $2,000 in intermediary fees. A reverse 1031 though, that can easily jump up to $7,000 or more depending on how complex the transaction is and how long the EAT needs to hold title. You're also potentially paying for legal structuring, extra lender fees, and closing costs. Drawback number three is that there's risk of a failed sale. Just like with a regular 1031, the clock is always ticking on a reverse exchange. Maybe your old property doesn't sell in time, or your buyer walks at the last minute. If that happens, you now own two properties, which, depending on how you look at it, may not be that bad, but it's definitely not good from a cash on hand perspective. And if you do eventually close on the sale of your property after 180 days, then there would be no tax deferral. So should you use a reverse 1031? Well, it depends. They make sense when you found a great deal and don't want to lose it, you've got access to a lot of capital, and you're confident your old property will sell within the deadline. But if you're low on liquidity or unsure about the timeline of your sale, it might be smarter to go the traditional route or wait until the timing aligns better. So in summary, a reverse 1031 exchange lets you acquire acquire your new property before selling the old one, while still deferring capital gains taxes. You need a qualified intermediary involved and an exchange accommodation title holder to hold title to the new property. You have 45 days to identify the property you're selling and 180 days from closing on the new property to sell your old property. And the drawbacks include higher costs, difficulties with financing, and the risk of not selling your original property in time. If you're thinking about using this strategy, make sure you've got a qualified team who understands how these deals work. If you found this content helpful, subscribe for more in-depth real estate strategies. And if you're mapping out your next move, reach out to talk with a financial planner who gets the real estate side of wealth building. All right, I'll see you next time.